feedback, except for when you are stepping up to ask a question or make a comment, please.
With the trouble we had, is the public still able to link in?
David, let us know when the live stream is ready to go. For us, yes, we'll be able to live stream part of it, and then it'll be uploaded as soon as we can. Okay, Councilwoman, we are ready to start. I will pull up the presentation.
Are we live streaming, right?
Yes.
Great. Welcome and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Alamo Citizens Advisory Committee. Tonight we've got an update session on the plaza design. Just to let you know that we will be live streaming our meeting until 6 p.m. where we are sharing the channel with the city's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Bond Committee meeting. So at 6 p.m. We'll be bumped so that session can be live streamed, but the session will be recorded in its entirety and available on YouTube as soon as possible this evening. So you'll be able to watch the meeting in its entirety, even though it will only be live stream until 6 o'clock. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our tri-chair, former Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran, to kick us off for the evening. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Rebecca Villagran, and I serve as Vice Chair of the Alamo Management Committee and Tri-Chair of this wonderful Alamo Citizens Advisory Committee. Thank you all for your patience. I'd like to recognize my fellow Tri-Chairs, Sue Ann Pemberton and Aaronetta Pierce, who are also on the call, and for their service. I also want to recognize Assistant City Manager Lori Houston and Alamo Trust Executive Director Kate Rogers, who are also in the meeting. Now, I want to thank you all for being here, who've been on this journey for all of these years and for these couple of months, specifically since the summer. We've had over 7 content discussion meetings to talk about the layered stories that will be told at the Alamo, and even some stories that are untold and need to be revealed. At the last meeting, we received an update on the Alamo narrative plan, and we will continue to receive updates and review that plan as it is developed. And yes, we are still working for a weekend day for all of the ACAC members to get together. Now, over the last several months, there has been the Alamo team that's been on the ground already working, has been studying design issues in the Alamo Plaza, as well as conducting a traffic study, which many of you all know about. And tonight we have updates for you all on the Plaza design plan and results from the traffic study. Any questions and comments may be emailed to alamoplan@sanantonio.gov. That's Alamoplan, all together, Alamoplan@sanantonio.gov. We'll have it connected to this recording. And now I will turn it over to, I believe Lori Houston is on now for the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Council Member, and good evening, Citizens Advisory Committee members. I'm going to breeze through the first 10 slides and then hand it over to Rhea Roberts to talk about more of the technical components of the plan. I want to remind everyone that the proposal you're going to see, you will see that we've retained the 5 key elements of the master plan. So we're going to restore the church in Long Barrack, delineate the historic footprint, recapture the Mission Plaza, and create a sense of reverence and respect. We're still planning on creating that world-class museum and will create a sense of arrival and enhance connectivity between the site and other public spaces. What we looked at based on the direction from the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Management Committee and City Council and the state, we retained the cenotaph. We're not lowering the grade. We're going to preserve the plaza access, and we're going to retain the parade and phase the street closures, which have already begun to close. Next slide. So I want to stress that the cenotaph will be repaired. It will not be moved. It's going to stay in the same location that it currently resides. The mission footprint will be delineated by paving material changes, and we will not lower the grade. The plaza will remain accessible to pedestrians, and it will not have railings. It'll be very porous. The parades and key rituals will be accommodated, and the streets will be closed as planned and approved with certain allowances. So I'm going to briefly go over the interpretive elements and the cenotaph, and then Rhea Roberts will go over the Fiesta Parade route, the First Amendment area, and then the street closure and security. I want to stress that we are at the conceptual level. We are not at design level. So this is all conceptual. What that means is, yes, we are going to do all these things, but the actual locations and what they look like, those are subject to change through the design process. Next slide. So first, I want to highlight the interpretive elements that need to be highlighted for us to be able to address the parade route and some of the other issues that we're going to be discussing in this plan. So we have the Palisades, which is a vertical element. We have the South Gate, that is going to be a vertical element. We have the 18-pounder, that's currently it's open. We have the acequia, we'd like to bring water through this site. And we also have areas for living history and interpretation, and then we have the North Wall. All of these have vertical elements that need to be able to be considered as we are designing the parade route. And so you will see that when Rhea goes through that parade route exercise, but I wanted to stress that these are the vertical elements that we know we need to be looking at when developing that parade route. Go to the next slide. The Palisade Exhibit, that is currently underway. It was approved by the THC. It is a wooden exhibit, and it will be able to be moved or taken down if necessary. Next slide. I want to stress Cenotaph. The THC did approve the work that we'll be taking to the Cenotaph. That was approved on October 29th. What we asked THC for approval is for us to do an investigation of the interior structure, so we really understand how the aluminum and steel are working together, so we can develop the repair plan for the Cenotaph. The Cenotaph is not going to move from its current location. We are going to repair it, and what THC approved was that first step for us to be able to understand what we need to do to fully repair the Cenotaph. We also got approval from the Cenotaph, from the THC, to put some bollards and chain around the Cenotaph. This is a temporary fix until the entire plaza is developed. Ultimately, we'd like there to be landscaping and lighting around the Cenotaph, but until the plaza is designed and constructed, we will be putting up bollards and a chain around it to protect it, because we do have individuals who climb the Cenotaph. It presents a safety issue for those that are visiting, as well as it's helping us. We need to help preserve the monument. So we don't want that type of activity going on the actual monument itself. So as I mentioned, we will have landscaping around the Cenotaph, and that's the long-term plan. We will be doing shade. The Cenotaph is not moving, so the parade route needs to consider the Cenotaph when we develop that route. And then I also mentioned the Living History Museum operations that will need to consider the Cenotaph when they're developing their programming. I'm going to turn it over to Rhea Roberts, who's going to talk about the actual route itself, as well as security, and then the proposed First Amendment zone. That is the term we're using right now, but most likely that will change as we further develop the design. Rhea?
Thanks, Lori. When the parade route is complete, it will continue to travel south on Alamo Plaza, and there will be seating to the north and the south of the historic mission footprint. And there'll be the ceremonial zone in front of the church for the wreath lane. And as you can see, it avoids those elements that Lori discussed, the vertical elements. We expect the north wall to be demountable, and then it will travel south and need to avoid the Cenotaph and then the 18-pounder exhibit, the south gate, and the Palisade. A reverent zone will be observed when the parade travels over the historic mission footprint, and next year's parade will observe that reverent zone. The Alamo Management Committee and the Fiesta Commission have been working together on that. And keep in mind that during construction of the museum and of the plaza, the parade may need to be rerouted, and we're not quite sure what this will look like, but this is what we expect the final route to be when everything is complete. Alamo Plaza, south of the historic footprint, will be designed to be a flexible space and will offer First Amendment activities. There'll be wayfinding and traffic controls at all of the gateways into this pedestrian-only area, including at the intersection of Alamo and Commerce Street. The promenade up from Commerce will welcome visitors to the Alamo and provide some orientation as they arrive from the south. And there'll be an active edge along the shops on the west side of the street and then in front of the hotel. First Amendment activities will be allowed in the plaza, but people will be asked to use this space. It'll be designed to be flexible to allow for gathering, and it'll provide shade around the edges. Street closures in the final plan include Alamo from Peacock Alley to Commerce Street, Houston Street from La Jolla to Avenue E, and Crockett Street from La Jolla to Bonham. This will provide that pedestrian-friendly zone around the historic mission footprint. The Menger Hotel Valet will continue to have their access from Bonham Street, and there'll be emergency access in the plaza. On June 1st, we permanently closed Alamo Street between Houston and Crockett Street. This has allowed for more programming by the Alamo, and it's created a safer pedestrian environment. Over the summer, we had Pape Dawson update their traffic study to consider what uses can be accommodated on Alamo Street between Commerce and Crockett, and then what improvements in the area will be needed. Previous plans considered converting La Jolla to two-way. I want to stress that that's no longer part of the plan. It will remain one-way southbound. The traffic study was updated after that street closure. Pape Dawson met with stakeholders, and they set up cameras to observe traffic during peak travel hours. The study determined that most vehicles detoured to Navarro, Presa, and Bowie with the minimal change in travel time. Levels of service at surrounding intersections were not impacted much, and loading zones on Alamo and Crockett were moderately used, and so they think there's adequate commercial loading on the nearby streets. Moving forward, the Menger Hotel's valet will return to its normal location on the north side of the hotel with access from Crockett and Bonham Streets. Deliveries and other loading will be located on surrounding streets and kept outside of this secure pedestrian perimeter. Carriages and hop-on, hop-off tour buses will be allowed through a permitting process on this section of Alamo Street from Commerce to Crockett. They'll be able to load south of Blum in front of the Joske's building and then travel north on Crockett and then west to La Jolla. Only permanent vehicles will be allowed in this area, and there will be traffic controls at the intersection of Commerce and Crockett, Commerce and Alamo and Crockett and La Jolla. Details on that process and exactly what those traffic controls will look like will be developed as part of our design. As we've discussed, we will create a safer pedestrian zone around the historic mission footprint. So this shows locations of those possible traffic controls. Emergency vehicles, permitted vehicles, and Fiesta parades will be allowed in certain areas. Operable bollards are currently being installed on Crockett Street, and so these other locations and controls will be addressed during design. That will be considered. And this concludes our updates for this evening. We do have representatives from Pape Dawson and Architects is here if there are specific questions on the traffic study or on the Cenotaph work. And again, questions and comments from the public may be emailed to alamoplan@sanantonio.gov.
Great. Thank you, Rhea. So let's open it up to questions from the committee. So for those of you that are not on camera, if you'd be kind enough to click on reactions so we can see a hand raised, and those of you on camera, just raise your hand. So do we have a first question? Davis.
You guys mentioned in terms of the buses being able to load and unload they're just south of Blum Street. When you say permitting process, is that open? How does that permitting work? Is it like the lottery with the ROSPO things, or is it going to be allowed to be able to, the people that are there to stay there?
It's going to be a very